Greetings, this is Casabez Makama, and you are watching the Quick Take by the Meridian World News. Um, this broadcast, we're talking about the protests that are taking place across the country, the United States, against the coronavirus lockdown, um, or let's say the state by state lockdowns. As many of you probably know, a couple weeks ago or so, many protests started erupting across the country, and notably Michigan, but other places across the country too, with President Trump famously calling these people very responsible people, and encouraging these protests. Here, this is from an article in the Daily Mail of UK, uh, showing these protests taking place, again, many different places: Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Ohio, Michigan. All of this is from uh, a report on April 20th. Fast forward to the last couple of days, we now have armed protesters going into the state houses of Michigan, armed protesters patrolling around in South Carolina. Um, there are many instances of these armed protests taking place around the country. And as you can see, or as you probably know, these protests are by and large by conservative white people, right wing, so called right wing conservative whites. Um, which leaves, a lot of the people who I know personally. I don't know people in these groups. I know many of people on the other sides, supposedly the other side, people who are on the so-called left or liberal leaning people. And I've seen many posts now in the last couple of days about these protests, basically saying that these people are hypocrites. These people are on one side they're encouraging their right to protest, on the other side they are criminalizing Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee during the national anthem. They're saying that um, on one side, people are demanding their rights to choose, but they're anti pro choice, or anti so called pro choice, anti abortion, basically. Um, and that there's this hypocrisy going on. I want to just say a couple things on that. First of all, these protests, as we can see, they're very large protests, very large numbers of people. Um, some of them Trump supporters, some of them uh, Christians, some of them anti-vaccine, some of them pro-gun. But not everybody in these protests is carrying guns. Not everybody in these protests are carrying Confederate flags. Not everybody in these protests are neo-Nazis. Okay. I think it's a mistake to group all these people into one group and say, all of you guys are hypocrites for, um, being mad at Colin Kaepernick, when we don't know that this is what everybody, in this group is doing. Um, Additionally, we don't really know, without knowing these people personally, their stances, and not knowing their views. I'm not really saying, and I'm definitely not saying that I agree, or I think I would agree 100% with these people on everything. However, what I think is really short-sighted is to say this is what Trump is promoting or supporting. This is what the right is supporting, and therefore it must be bad for us. Um, I think it's a mistake. I think it's not really, it's not putting any critical thinking to work. The question right now needs to be, what makes sense, not just reacting to what other people are doing. And again, that has to be a critical analysis of the data and the information that's coming out, and coming out um, frequently every day. There's more information coming out, and the more we look into things, the more we'll find things that we didn't know about. And so, having done that in the course of the last few days, I do have, more analysis that I want to share, but not today. Really, today I'm just, doing a post on these protests. Um, but I will be doing a more of a full length investigative report on the coronavirus in general, which hopefully you can find informative. But I did have a second point before I sign off today. I do have a second point on these protests. When you look at these, guys here, you look at this guy here, um, whether they're waving a American flag, a Confederate flag, or a Nazi flag, um, one thing I can say is I'm not, this is not the person that I want to be, this is not the person that I want my life to be in their hands. So on one side, you have the government. And if you're Black, a person of color, or if you're just paying attention, you will see that the government is not acting in our best interest. The government is lying to us. The government is famous for just conning us and trying to exploit us. And we see the continual pattern of the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer under the government and its policies, regardless of who is in office, regardless of whether you have a left wing or a right wing or a middle person in office. Doesn't matter. We are seeing this continual process of, destruction of the environment, destruction of human values, destruction of, humans destroying each other and destroying themselves. The society that's in trouble under the leadership of the current government. Now you see another very, very, very broad group of people who are angry with the way the government is functioning, who are not, and rightfully, very rightfully, I would say, not thinking that this government is functioning in their interest, because it's not. It's not functioning in their interest. You can make the point that there's white supremacy, and sure there is, but that doesn't mean that these, poor disenfranchised whites are not being exploited too. They might be maybe less exploited or less oppressed, so-called, on the scale than, people of color. But that doesn't mean that they are getting their, getting, treated well. That doesn't mean that they're really benefiting. So they're angry by the way, what they're getting from the system. And I agree that they have a good reason to be angry. They have a good reason to protest. Personally, that's my view. But if we take this a little further and say these people who are armed exercise their arms and exercise what they consider to be their right to revolt based on what the Constitution states, that people should rise up against the government if it becomes corrupt. And if they decide to exercise that, are these the people that we want? You see, is this, the climate that we want? Do we want a civil war? Do we want, and do we want a civil war where one side or the other, neither one of them care about us? That's a question, because and that question should show that one side or the other, left or right, it doesn't matter. We are still the victims either way. And if we're going to be the victims either way, I think we have to think long and hard about our own approach to our survival. and what we're going to do to secure it. That's my quick take for the day. Hope you guys got something from that. Again, this is just a question. What do we do? I'm not trying to say, one thing or another. I know what I'm doing. Personally, I'm looking to relocate my family to a place that's safer than the United States. However, that might not be the answer for everybody. For those of you who think that this is a home, what you want to keep as your home, how do you secure that for yourself? How do you secure that for your generations to come? How do you secure that for your communities? You see, we aren't preparing, we aren't organizing ourselves on that kind of a level. When I say we, I'm talking about people of color. I'm talking about people who consider themselves, wanting to be in harmony with the earth, wanting to be part of the solution to the problems that are plaguing humanity right now. There's people, and I'm saying there's many people doing good work on individual basis and in small groups, but we don't have any large scale movements for our communities. So what are we going to do about that? That's my question to you. This is Kasabez Makma, and this is the quick take for the day. All right, take care.